In business, success is pretty simple. You sell a lot of units, you make a lot of profit. It's a brutal, straightforward formula. But what if I told you that one of the biggest financial mistakes a company ever made was also one of its greatest engineering triumphs? What if a company deliberately designed and built a product knowing they'd lose a staggering amount of money on every single one? It sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds like corporate malpractice. But in the mid-2000s, Honda, the absolute titan of sensible, reliable, you can set your watch to it transportation, did something completely insane. They built a motorcycle so complex, so bespoke, and so over the top that each one reportedly cost 6 figures to make. Then, they sold it for a fraction of that. They willingly took a financial bath that would have sunk a smaller company. This is the story of that machine, the Honda Valkyrie Rune. A rolling sculpture, an engineering marvel, and a glorious, beautiful mistake. This is the story of the best bad decision Honda ever made. But before we get into the full story of how Honda pulled off this wild engineering flex, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you love deep dives into the greatest bikes ever made, especially the ones that didn't make sense on paper but still made history. Alright, let's get into it. To really get how wild the Rune was, you have to remember what Honda stood for in the late 90s and early 2000s. The name Honda meant logic, quality, and predictability. This was the company that gave us the Civic, the Accord, the CR-V, cars celebrated for being impeccably engineered, great on gas, and just working all the time. They built machines for your head, not always for your heart. Their motorcycle division, while legendary, followed a similar playbook. The Goldwing was the undisputed king of long-distance touring, basically a two-wheeled luxury sedan. Their sport bikes, like the CBR series, were performance scalpels, sharpened by a legacy of racing wins. Honda was the smart choice, the sensible choice. They were masters of mass production, of squeezing every last cent out of a part without ever sacrificing their legendary quality. But there was a corner of the motorcycle world where logic had no place. A kingdom where emotion, tradition, and image were king. That was the world of the cruiser. And in America, that world was ruled by one name, Harley-Davidson. For decades, Japanese companies tried to carve out a piece of this market, usually by making bikes that were, well, let's be kind and say they were derivative of the Milwaukee icon. They built V-twins that were reliable, efficient, and often technically superior, but they always felt like cover bands playing someone else's greatest hits. They just lacked that authentic soul. Honda tried too. Their big swing was the original Valkyrie in 1997. It was a bold move, taking the massive 1,520 cubic centimeter flat-six engine from the Goldwing and dropping it into a muscular cruiser frame. The Valkyrie was an awesome bike. A power cruiser before that was even really a term, with great handling and a powerhouse engine. It built a loyal following, but it didn't completely rewrite the rules. By the turn of the millennium, though, something was stirring at Honda. They wanted to do more than just compete. They wanted to make a statement so loud and so final that no one could ignore it. An executive said they wanted to set the bar higher than ever, while also exploding old limitations on what a manufacturer could mass produce. This wasn't about building a better Harley. This was about creating something totally new. A project where the artists and designers would lead, and the accountants and engineers would just have to figure out how to make the dream real, cost be damned. They wanted a halo bike, a machine that existed not to make a profit, but to show off the absolute peak of Honda's imagination and engineering muscle. The stage was set for an incredible act of corporate rebellion. Honda, the master of pragmatism, was about to light its own rulebook on fire to build a motorcycle based on one intoxicating question: what if? The journey to the Rune didn't start in some sterile lab in Japan. It started in America with a dream. You can trace its DNA back to a 1995 concept bike called the Zodia. It was a wild, futuristic design with a V-twin engine and a radical trailing link front suspension. It was pure fantasy, but it planted a seed. Inspired by the Zodia, Honda's American design studio, HRA, got a special mission: figure out the future of the flat-six cruiser. They cooked up a series of concepts called T1 through T4. And they didn't just keep them in-house, they took them to motorcycle shows and put them in front of real riders, asking for their brutally honest opinions. T1 was a muscular hot rod. T3 was a stretched-out street dragster, but it was T2 that made jaws drop. T2 was different. It was long, low, and impossibly clean, blending retrofuturism with high-tech. It had that crazy trailing link fork from the Zodia concept and a single-sided swing arm that left the whole rear wheel exposed. The exhaust just seemed to melt into the bike's bodywork. The public reaction wasn't just good, it was emotional. People were passionate. Focus groups were clear. They didn't want a bike inspired by T2. They wanted Honda to build that exact bike. One reviewer famously said, "I'd buy one today. It's just too bad Honda can't make it this way," figuring the wild design and all that chrome would be impossible to mass produce. That sentiment became a dare. Inside Honda, many people said the same thing. Great concept, but we can't build it. And that was all the motivation they needed. Project leader Masanori Aoki, a legend in his own right, was brought on. He later admitted that even he thought it was too radical to mass produce without big changes. But the order from the top was simple: build the dream. The designers were told something almost unheard of in the industry. The final price of the motorcycle was not to be a consideration. For once, the artists were completely free from commercial chains. In nearly every decision, the designers got what they wanted, and it was up to the engineers to invent the technology to make it happen. The project was codenamed NRX-1800, and it was given a name that perfectly captured its spirit: Rune, an ancient word for mystery or secret. It was a fitting name for a machine born from a process that was the polar opposite of Honda's normal function-first philosophy. The team in Marysville, Ohio was tasked with the impossible: turn a one-off show bike into a production motorcycle that still met Honda's legendary standards for quality. They had to invent entirely new manufacturing processes just for some of the parts. The dream was becoming metal. Just a quick break before we keep going. If you're enjoying this dive into the Rune story, make sure you're subscribed. I cover legendary motorcycles every week, especially the ones that broke the rules or changed history. Hit that bell too, so you don't miss the next one. Now, back to the Rune. When the production Valkyrie Rune was finally unveiled for the 2004 model year, the motorcycle world just stood there in collective awe. Honda had actually done it. They didn't water it down. They didn't compromise. The bike that rolled off the assembly line was a breathtakingly faithful version of the T2 concept. It felt less like a product and more like a declaration. This was not a bike built to a cost. It was a bike built to a standard, and that standard was perfection. The Rune is an exercise in glorious excess. Let's start with the heart of the beast: the 1832 cubic centimeters liquid-cooled flat six from the Goldwing, already a legend for its turbine-smooth power. But Honda didn't just drop in a stock motor. The engineers gave it a serious personality transplant. The Rune's engine got 6 individual throttle bodies, one for each cylinder, plus hotter camshafts and a remapped fuel injection system for a more aggressive character. The result was an engine that put out a claimed 118 horsepower and a massive 123 foot-pounds of torque. It has this immediate low-end grunt that feels like a force of nature. It just pulls from any RPM in any gear with an effortless, locomotive-like surge. And the sound is totally unique: a deep, resonant hum that climbs to a sophisticated howl, nothing like a typical V-twin. But the engine is almost overshadowed by the chassis. The most defining feature is that front end. It's a trailing link front suspension, a design so rare on production motorcycles you can count them on one hand. Instead of normal forks, the front wheel is held by a massive girder-like structure connected to twin shocks hidden up by the headlight. This incredibly complex setup gives it that long, raked-out look without messing up the steering, and it provides an uncannily smooth ride. The cost of this single component was rumored to be astronomical. The rear suspension is just as exotic. It uses a Unit ProLink single-shock system, a design with roots in Honda's MotoGP race bikes. The entire shock assembly is contained within the swing arm itself, which is why the rear suspension seems to disappear, giving it that ultra-clean look. This design allows for a super low seat height of just 27.2 inches while still delivering a controlled, comfortable ride. A bike this long and this heavy, a staggering 878 pounds wet, has no right to handle as well as it does. But the advanced suspension, a stiff aluminum frame, and the largest brake discs Honda had ever put on a production bike all work together to make the Rune feel shockingly composed. And then there's the finish. The mantra was no plastic. The fenders are deep-drawn steel. The gorgeous, seamless 6.1-gallon fuel tank is a work of art. The radiator is hidden behind a sculpted, chrome-plated grille that looks like it belongs on a vintage luxury car. The flush-mounted LED taillights are so perfectly integrated they look like they were poured into the fender. Everything that looks like metal is metal. The chrome is impossibly deep. The paint has a liquid quality. The attention to detail is just mind-blowing, from the remote steering lock to the digital gauges built seamlessly into the tank. So, Honda had built their masterpiece. Now came the hard part, putting a price on it. This is where the story of the Rune becomes a financial legend. The exact numbers are a bit of a corporate mystery, but the most widely reported estimates are staggering. It's believed that the all-in cost for Honda to design, tool up for, and build each Valkyrie Rune was somewhere around $100,000 per bike. Faced with this six-figure cost, what did Honda do? They set the sticker price at around $27,000. Let that sink in. For every single Rune sold, Honda was reportedly lighting a pile of cash worth about $75,000 on fire. This wasn't a mistake or a miscalculation, it was a deliberate choice. The Rune was never meant to make a profit. It was officially categorized as a marketing expense. It was the most extravagant advertisement in motorcycle history, a flex of corporate muscle to prove that when it came to building motorcycles, they could do anything they wanted, better than anyone else. To control the rollout, Honda made the distribution as exclusive as the bike itself. Initially, each of Honda's US dealers was guaranteed just one unit, creating immediate scarcity and hype. Internationally, the bike was even rarer, with only a handful officially reaching markets in Europe and Australia, making most overseas Runes private imports. This reinforced its status as a US-centered halo project. The market, however, was a bit baffled. The motorcycle press was stunned, praising the Rune for its audacity and quality, but the average cruiser buyer didn't get it. In a world of V-twin heritage, the Rune was an alien. It looked like it rode out of a sci-fi movie, its flat-six engine was unheard of, and its price tag was still steep, nearly $10,000 more than a premium Goldwing. Sales were predictably slow. Honda made the bike for the 2004 and 2005 model years. Total production was extremely limited, with most sources estimating that only 1,500 to 3,000 units were ever built. Many dealers had brand new Runes sitting on their showroom floors for years. Commercially, the project was an abject failure. The bike was quietly discontinued. The great experiment was over. But in the world of collectibles, the recipe for a future legend often includes a few key things: radical design, groundbreaking tech, a great story, and above all, rarity. The Honda Valkyrie Rune had them all. Its failure in the showroom was just the final ingredient it needed to become immortal. As years went by, the bike's weirdness and extravagance, the very things that made it a tough sell in 2004, became its greatest assets. People started seeing it for what it truly was: a limited edition, factory-built custom. The fact that Honda lost a fortune on each one wasn't a sign of failure anymore, it was proof of its uncompromising quality. The legendary production cost became its mythic origin story. Because so few were made, they became incredibly scarce. Owners knew they had something special and often kept them in pristine, low-mileage condition. Finding a Rune for sale became an event. Today, the Rune is a blue-chip collectible. Its status as an artistic and technical masterpiece is secure. Pristine, low-mileage examples often trade for prices above their original MSRP, with exceptional bikes fetching close to $40,000 and some even approaching $50,000 at auction. The market finally caught up to Honda's vision. And that's why this $100,000 mistake is a bike, if I had the money, I'd buy tomorrow. It represents a moment in time we'll probably never see again. A time when a giant corporation was willing to take a massive financial hit just to create something beautiful. It's a rebellion against mediocrity. In an age of cost-cutting and design by committee, the Rune is a monument to what's possible. Owning one isn't just about owning a motorcycle, it's about owning a piece of that defiant, irrational, brilliant spirit. It's a 900-pound sculpture you can actually ride, powered by one of the smoothest engines ever made, wrapped in a design that still looks like it's from the future, 20 years later. The story of the Honda Valkyrie Rune is a paradox. It was a sales disaster that became a huge success. It was a financial black hole that cemented a brand's reputation for greatness. Honda set out to prove they could build the most radical, high-quality custom cruiser imaginable, and they succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. They created a motorcycle so true to its concept that it defied the very economics of mass production. The Rune remains a singular achievement. It's what happens when a company known for its brains decides to listen to its heart, consequences be damned. It's a testament to the idea that true success isn't always measured on a balance sheet. Sometimes it's measured by the sheer audacity of the attempt and the legend that gets left behind. So, I have to ask you, what's your favorite motorcycle that was a commercial flop but an engineering masterpiece? What's that one brilliant mistake you wish was sitting in your garage? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into motorcycle history. And as always, ride safe, ride hard, and thanks for watching.